Hello students, welcome to AKS. We'll continue our discussion on part 5 that deals with the Union Executive. In our last lecture, we discussed about the President. But before that, let us try to understand the parliamentary type of government. We'll try to just understand the difference between the presidential type of government and the parliamentary type of government. Okay. In a parliamentary type of government, the executive is always derived from the legislature. Executive is derived from the legislature. In a presidential type of government, the head of the state and the head of the government are a single office. So please note that in a presidential form of government, the executive cannot be part of the legislature. Executive is not part of the legislature. That is, political executive is not born from the legislature, unlike the parliamentary government when executive and legislature is one organic whole. In a parliamentary form of government, all the council of ministers have to be members of the legislature. That is, political executive is derived from the legislature. Number 2, in a parliamentary form of government, executive is accountable and responsible. Executive is accountable and responsible to the legislature. Number 3, in a parliamentary form of government, there is always a separation between the head of the government, that is a real executive, and the head of the state, that is a President of India in case of India. So there is a difference between the head of the government and the head of the state. Okay. And number 3, in the parliamentary form of government, the head of the government, that is a prime minister, is the real executive, whereas the president is a nominal executive. That is, he's the head of the state and is only a constitutional head. Number 5, there is always a plural executive. There's always a plural executive in a parliamentary form of government. That is, executive powers are distributed between the council of ministers. Number 6, each member of the council of ministers exercises independent executive power. Each member of the council of ministers exercises independent executive powers. Number 7, the prime minister in a parliamentary form of government is not elected directly by the people as a prime minister. He is directly elected as a member of the parliament. But the PM, that is a real executive, is selected by the members of the majority party. The exception to this practice is in Israel, the prime minister is directly elected by the people as the prime minister. Apart from that, most of the democracies, parliamentary democracies, only select the prime minister from amongst the majority party. So now let us try to understand what is this presidential system. In presidential system, number 1, as we discussed, the executive cannot be part of the legislature. That is, a political executive is not born from the legislature, unlike in parliamentary government when the executive and legislature is an organic whole. Number 2, the head of the state and the head of the government are a single office. Head of the state, and head of the government are one and the same. There is no separation between the head of the state and head of the government, and there exists only one house. There exists only one head of the state and the government, that is the president. Number 3, the executive is not accountable nor responsible to the legislature. Executive not accountable to the legislature. The ministers are assistants of the president. They exercise the power on the behalf of the president. They do not have any independent functioning executive powers. Individual ministers are answerable only to the president but not the legislature. It is a singular executive. It is also a singular executive, not a plural. Singular executive because the entire executive power is concentrated in the president, but not the ministers. Also, in a presidential system, the president is elected for a fixed term of office. In a parliamentary form of government, the prime minister enjoys the office as long as he commands the confidence of the legislature. There is no fixed term, no fixed term for the prime minister. No fixed term for the prime minister. So now you must be having a question, why did India choose a parliamentary form of government? India chose parliamentary form of government because of the experience of working in a parliamentary form of government under the British rule. You know, when India was under the British rule, it has been introduced to the parliamentary tenets of governance through the various councils act, like the 1861 Councils Act, the various regulating acts, starting from the 1773 Regulating Act, okay, 1909 Councils Act, Indian Councils Act, then the Government of India Act 1935. Okay, like this, various acts and processes were introduced in the British during the British period itself. Number two, given the diversity of Indian society, different sections of the society can be made part of the decision making in a more meaningful manner if they can be but if they are part of the legislative process, and they are being chosen as the representatives of the people in a parliamentary form of government. Also, in a country like India, collective decision making is better than singular decision making, as a singular or a presidential decision making may lead to dictatorial government. Okay, so these are the reasons that why we have adopted a parliamentary form of government. Okay. So we already discussed that Article 53 says that the President of India will exercise his executive powers either directly or indirectly through officers subordinate to him, who are more or less the Council of Ministers as well as the civil servants and the armed forces heads. Okay. Now let us deal with Article 74. This gives rise to parliamentary democracy in India. It says that there shall be a council of ministers who are headed by the prime minister to aid and advise the president of India. There shall be a council of ministers headed by the prime minister to aid and advise the president of India so that the president can exercise his executive powers. What is the significance of Article 74? It separates the head of the government from the head of the state. The head of the state is a titular head, that is the president. Article 74 reduces the president to a titular or a constitutional head or a nominal executive. The President of India shall always act in accordance to such advice of the Council of Ministers, who are democratically elected and headed by the Prime Minister. But President of India can send such an advice of the Council of Ministers for their reconsideration. After the Council of Ministers reconsiders and sends such decision to the President of India, then the President of India is obligated to act in accordance to the advice of the Council of Ministers. Article 74, in short, makes the President of India as a de jure executive, that is, he is an executive only by law, whereas the Prime Minister is the de facto executive, that is, he is the head of the government by fact. In the year 1974, in the Shamsher Singh was this Union of India case, the Supreme Court said that under Article 74, it is always mandatory for the President to act on the advice of the Council of Ministers. However, by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976 was passed to amend Article 74. Before 1976, Article 74 said that the President of India may act, please note this word, he may act in accordance with the advice of the Council of Ministers. But by the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976, it said that it amended Article it amended Article 74 and said that the president shall always act in accordance of the advice of the Council of Ministers. However, by the 44th Amendment Act of 1978, there was provision of limited discretion to the President of India, where it mentioned that the President can send the advice of the Council of Ministers back to them for reconsideration, but it can be done only once. This is the discretionary power given to the President of India. This because this reconsidered advice of the Council of Ministers shall be binding on the President of India. This is called as suspensive veto. What do you call this as? Suspensive veto of the President of India. That is the power to send the advice of the Council of Ministers back to the Council of Ministers for their reconsideration. Why do we call it a suspensive veto? Because the legislature is held in suspension. Article 74 also provides for a plural executive in the form of a Council of Ministers who take collective decision making. Then let us look at Article 75 of the Constitution. Article 75 states that the Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers will be appointed by the President of India. The PM and the Council of Ministers are appointed by the President of India. So, Sir Ivor Jennings, a political analyst, says that the most important function of the President of India is to appoint the Prime Minister because he cannot function without the aid and advice of the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. Number two, Article 75, number 2 says that the President of India appoints a Council of Ministers on the recommendation of the Prime Minister. So number 1, the primary function of the President is to appoint the Prime Minister of India. Once the Prime Minister is appointed, he is responsible to appoint the Council of Ministers, but with the advice and recommendations of the Prime Minister of India. The Council of Ministers stays in office only during the pleasure of the President of India. But the catch here is, but to dismiss a particular minister within the Council of Ministers, the President of India can do so only when he is advised by the Prime Minister, only on the recommendations of the Prime Minister. The Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister will be collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha. Article 75 also says that the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister will be collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha. This is guaranteeing executive accountability to the legislature by Article 75. This also means that the Council of Ministers is being treated as a single entity. That is, it is a monolithic institution. If the Prime Minister resigns, automatically all the Council of Ministers are deemed to be out of the office. Also, Article 75 says that a motion of no confidence can be taken against the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister in the Lok Sabha under Article 75. So, Article 75 is also saying when a motion of no confidence can be taken against the Council of Ministers by the Prime Minister, and this is possible in the Lok Sabha only because it is the popular house. A minister who is not a member of either house of the Parliament for more than 6 months ceases to be a minister. That is, it is ensuring that the executive is born from the legislature only. Though, if an executive is nominated as a minister, if the executive is selected if one person is selected as a minister, okay, he can hold office only until 6 months. Within the 6 months, he has to be part of any of the houses of the Parliament, whether the Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, he has to be part of that house. Okay, now let us deal with Article 78. We have discussed about Article 75 of the Constitution, which has given us several provisions regarding the executive and the president. Now let us deal with Article 78. Article 78 is India's constitutional provision to provide for a parliamentary democracy. to provide for a parliamentary democracy. It is the duty of the Prime Minister to provide all information to the President of India on all the decisions taken by the Council of Ministers. This is the only article in the Constitution which defines the duty of the Prime Minister. It is the duty of the Prime Minister to supply information to the President of India on all matters regarding the administration of the Union when the President seeks such information as well. For example, the Government of India appointed a Thakkar committee to inquire into the assassination of Mrs. Indira Gandhi. Also, the Commissions of Inquiry Act, the government has the power not to table the report of the Inquiry Commission in the Parliament in public interest. In the press, it was reported that President Zail Singh, the then President Zail Singh, under Article 78, asked Rajiv Gandhi, the then Prime Minister, to provide the report of the Thakkar committee. But Rajiv Gandhi rejected the plea of the President. Rajiv Gandhi, relying on Article 74, did not provide the information, stating that the President shall always act only on the advice of the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister. But after Article 74, there were some amendments after the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, you all know. So there is still ambiguity regarding the President of India seeking advice from the Prime Minister. Article 78 is the only article in the Constitution which provides a direct link between the President of India and the Prime Minister heading his Council of Ministers. Then let us look into Article 85. Article 85 of the Constitution says that the President has the power to dissolve the Lok Sabha on the advice of the Prime Minister. The President can dissolve Lok Sabha on the advice of the Prime Minister. The President has the power to prorogue a session of any house of the Parliament, that is, bringing the session of a house to a close. So, adjournment of a session is done by the Speaker or the Chairman. A session consists of numerous meetings. Okay, adjournment is done by the Speaker or the Chairman. When we talk about Speaker, it is the Speaker of the Lok Sabha. When we talk about Chairman, it is the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha. But when what the President does is prorogation of the House. Okay, the Speaker will mention the time for re-assembly. When the Speaker adjourns the Lok Sabha, he mentions the time for re-assembly. Speaker adjourns the meetings. President of India prorogues the sessions. You have some sessions like the Parliament sessions, you have something like winter session, budget session. The President prorogues these sessions. Within a particular parliamentary session, there are various meetings. The Speaker has the power to adjourn the meeting, but it is the President of India who has the power to prorogue the session of the House. In prorogation, the time is not mentioned. When a parliament session is prorogued, the time for prorogation is not mentioned, the time for reassembly. When the Speaker or the Chairman of the Parliament adjourns it, he is also responsible to summon the meeting once again. When the President prorogues the session of the Parliament, he is the person responsible to summon the House once again. The President of India has the power to send messages to the Parliament. Okay. Under Article 85, the President of India is mandated to address the first day of the first session in a year and the first day of the commencement of the first session of the Parliament after the general election. So he is constitutionally obligated under Article 85 to address the budgetary session, the first day of the first session after each year, after the commencement of each year means usually it is a budget session, and after an election year, whenever the Parliament commences, the first day of such commencement of the first session after the general elections is also to be addressed by the President of India. That is what we call as a presidential address. Now let us look into Article 111, Article 111 of the Constitution. This closes in the relationship between the Council of Ministers and the President of India, because Article 111 gives the veto power to the President of India. Veto power is the power of the President to disagree. The President of India enjoys absolute veto power, which is borrowed from the Crown of Okay, what do you mean by absolute veto? The power to withhold, that is, not to give assent to a particular decision of the Council of Ministers or the legislature. That is the power to reject a bill. When the President of India exercises absolute veto, he is exercising on the advice of the Prime Minister. The President of India exercises absolute veto on the bills of the state legislature that are reserved by the governors for the advice of the President of India. President of India can exercise absolute veto on a private member bill. That is, what is a private member bill? That is an MP who passes the bill, but he is not a minister. President of India exercises absolute veto on a government bill of the Union when such a bill has been sponsored by any minister and is passed by both the houses. The president has not given the assent, and a new government comes into power after the dissolution of the old house, and the new council of ministers advises the president of India to withhold his assent. This is what you call as absolute veto that the president exercises regarding a private bill, regarding a state legislative bill, power reserved by the governor, and regarding a bill which is passed by the old government but not given to assent by the president. Then you have something called a suspensive veto. By the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1978, it declared that the President of India can send the advice of the Council of Ministers back for reconsideration. That is, he is temporarily suspending legislature. When the President of India sends the bill back to the Council of Ministers, he can also give some recommendations on such a legislature. Under Article 74, if a reconsidered bill is coming back to the President of India, it is sent only after it is put to vote in the Parliament by a simple majority. Whatever was the original majority with which the bill was passed by the Parliament is not a criteria anymore. Okay, so President has sent a particular bill for reconsideration. Okay, the Council of Ministers, if they reconsidered the bill, okay, the Council of Ministers, if they resend it back to the Parliament, okay, the Council of Ministers put that particular bill for vote, and it is passed through a simple majority. See you, when there is a constitution amendment bill, it requires a special majority, okay, for it to pass. But if it is reconsidered, I'm just giving a hypothetical example. If this president sends it back for reconsideration ministers, and this council of ministers have to again send it back to the president for his assent, the reconsidered bill, that reconsidered bill can be passed by a simple majority, and the president, it is sent to the president for his assent. Okay, that's what we mean by saying that whatever was the original majority with which the bill was passed by the parliament is not a criteria anymore. A reconsidered bill is always passed by the parliament by a simple majority. The President of India has to mandatorily give his assent to the reconsidered bill. This is what is the suspensive veto of the President. It can be sent for reconsideration only once. After that, the President is mandatorily or constitutionally obligated to give his willful assent to the bill. Suspensive veto of the president has been borrowed from France. Okay. Also, we have discussed about suspensive veto, absolute veto. Now let us discuss about pocket veto. Article 111 does not mention any time period for the president to give his assent to a particular legislature. So the pocket veto of the president can be exercised when the bill is attracting adverse public opinion, in the hope that the Prime Minister will communicate or reconsider the President's such legislature and request the President of India to veto the bill in the wake of adverse public opinion. Number two, when can the President exercise pocket veto? The President is exercising the power of pocket veto directly on the advice of the Prime Minister. If the Prime Minister himself says the President not to act on a particular legislature, then also the president can exercise his pocket veto, that he does not act on the bill. Okay, as there is no time period within which the president is to act on the bill, he does not act on the bill, and the legislature is put into abeyance. Okay,